I knew something had shifted the moment I stepped into the secure server room and caught the scent of eucalyptus, where the sharp smell of hot electronics used to hang in the air. The whiteboards that used to be covered in intricate network schematics now held sparkly vision boards plastered with beach photos and shallow affirmations. I'd poured 2 decades of my life into making sure this company's digital backbone never buckled, while everyone around me went about their day completely oblivious to the fires I was quietly putting out behind the scenes, every single day. My name's Harper. I'm 42, and I've spent my entire career keeping complicated systems alive and running. I've pulled entire production environments back from the brink using nothing but raw problem-solving and code, while people around me lost their nerve. Office politics and trust fall exercises have never interested me. My attention has always been on one thing: making sure the data centers didn't fail. For 5 years, I was essentially the load-bearing wall of Vanguard's infrastructure, even though nobody above me really noticed I was there. Then Preston showed up, the new VP of Operations and, surprise, the founder's son. He had way more confidence than competence, the kind of guy who thought skipping socks with his designer shoes somehow made him qualified to oversee international networks. He brought his girlfriend Willow into the picture too. She described herself as spiritually attuned, and it wasn't long before she was walking through the server racks burning sage. That was the moment I understood, on some level, that my days there were numbered. Little by little, my incident reports and technical assessments got waved off as outdated thinking. I stopped getting invited to the meetings that actually shaped where the company was headed. My access, my credentials, my input, all of it quietly eroded. Meanwhile, Willow had taken to holding her little workflow realignment sessions in my own office, trying to reshape how we operated around her sense of energy and flow. It became obvious they were just waiting until they felt secure enough to take the wheel completely, even if it meant steering straight into a wall. So I spent my last few weeks there doing the only thing that still mattered to me: quietly documenting every system map, every license agreement, every piece of architecture that kept the whole operation breathing. Because if they were going to run it into the ground, they were at least going to have to do it without me holding it together first. I'd quietly built a fail-safe into the system, a kind of silent watchdog running underneath everything. Calling it sabotage wouldn't be fair. It was simply designed so that certain core functions couldn't operate without my personal signature behind them. If anyone tried to touch the primary access points without the right credentials, the whole framework would start degrading on its own, and it would stay that way until I personally stepped back in to restore things. It happened on an otherwise unremarkable Monday morning. I got called into the glass-walled office Preston liked to refer to as his strategy room. Willip was draped across the conference table sipping some green concoction, while Preston scrolled through his phone with that self-satisfied look he always wore. He told me they were restructuring the department and that my position didn't fit where they were headed, that my approach just wasn't aligned with their vision going forward. I stood there, and for a second, everything went numb. Then I set my badge down on the desk, calm, no theatrics. I looked him straight in the eye and told him he had 15 minutes before things went dark. He laughed it off, completely convinced he could hold the whole operation together without me. I didn't argue. I just turned and walked out the door for the last time. I felt lighter than I had in years because I already knew exactly what was coming. By the time I got to my car, my phone was already buzzing nonstop, panicked messages from employees. Payroll had locked up, the external data centers were throwing critical errors nobody could explain. I sat in my car and watched it all unravel in real time, the network I'd spent years building starting to come apart at the seams. Preston texted asking if I was still nearby. I deleted it without a second thought. The collapse was almost elegant in how thorough it was. Every system I'd maintained needed a specific authentication handshake, one only I could provide.
Willow tried troubleshooting the terminals like they were social media dashboards, which only sped up the failures spreading across the network. Within a few hours, every status indicator had flipped from green to red as the safeguards I'd built automatically began isolating the corrupted segments to stop the damage from spreading further. Then Preston tried forcing a full system reset, the one move guaranteed to make things worse. The architecture was built specifically to block unauthorized overrides from anyone without the master encryption keys. That reset attempt triggered a complete lockdown. Meanwhile, Arthur, the founder, was flying back from an overseas trip, expecting to log into his usual dashboard and see everything humming along like always. Instead, he found his entire company dark, 13 data centers, all glowing red, unreachable, and Arthur wanted answers. Who had locked him out of his own company, and why couldn't anyone get back in?
His assistants and outside consultants stood around the boardroom table, staring at their shoes because none of them had a single answer to offer. It finally hit Arthur that the only person who could actually fix this mess was the very woman his son had pushed out for not having the right energy. He gave the order, track me down and get me into that boardroom immediately. I walked in the next morning with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from already knowing how the story ends. The room was packed with senior executives and lawyers, all of them visibly rattled, sweating through their tailored suits. Arthur sat at the head of the table looking like a man who'd watched his empire slip through his fingers in a single afternoon. He looked straight at me and asked why the network refused to respond to any of his commands. I opened my tablet, typed a short sequence of commands, and just like that, all 13 data centers flickered back online. The wall display shifted from red to a steady, calm green. The system was stable again. I turned to the board and told them plainly, this wasn't sabotage. I hadn't broken anything. I'd simply stepped out of the equation and let the infrastructure behave exactly the way I'd built it to behave. Arthur turned to Preston and right there in front of everyone, stripped him of his title. Preston opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but the silence in that room was heavy enough to crush any defense he might have tried to offer. Then I pulled out an old contract, one I'd signed years earlier, during an entirely different crisis, with an addendum tied to equity compensation. It stated in plain terms that I held a controlling stake in the company, earned through my handling of the infrastructure. You could feel the room shift as the legal team scrambled to verify it. I'd kept records of everything for years. They just never bothered to look, until it was too late to dispute any of it. I didn't need to raise my voice or fight for anything. The paperwork spoke for itself. I was the one who actually owned Vanguard Logic's future. Arthur looked at me, real respect this time, and asked me to take the company forward into its next chapter. I said yes, not for the money, not for the title, but to make sure the whole operation would never again be held hostage by someone else's incompetence. I walked out of that building that day, having gone from the invisible person keeping everything running to the person who actually owned it. If there's one thing worth remembering from all this, it's this: never underestimate the person quietly holding up the walls that keep your entire world from collapsing.